Familiar with it? We're around exactly 60 years now. It's our anniversary year. And so we're really happy to be here. We do a lot of things for a lot of folks. We do them, and Rick Farhan, my Chief Development Officer, 4 years. I feel like 40. You know where I slipped on 40? I was about to choose Barbara as my work life, and so the number 40 popped in my head. I'm not sure what that's about. So we at West Bergen do a number of different things. We do lots of counseling. We do lots of folks for kids. We have the Center for Children and Youth that Tom Palmer were very involved in launching years ago up in Ramsey, and we are very, very focused on children and families. Over the last couple of years, one of the things that we have done, in the last 5, is we have slowly made our way into the school systems in Bergen County. So at this moment, West Bergen has 19 contracts with 19 different school districts where there is a West Bergen therapist, our employee, our world, sitting in the school. They're not guidance counselors. They don't care where the kids go to college. They don't care what classes they're taking. They are there strictly to focus on mental health. I'm really proud and a big challenge, in all honesty, that this year in September 1, we started with the Ridgewood School District. So, we have 3 therapists in our Ridgewood School District. So take yourself then into our position. We're a new mental health provider. We are here, and then a death by suicide occurs in the first 30 days of school. Really challenging moment for West Bergen, a challenging moment for our therapists, a challenging moment for our organization. I'm going to stretch here and say I need it to be a challenging moment for everyone sitting in this room as well. We all are part of this situation. We are all part of this important moment. Bring us forward, we had the 3 therapists in Ridgewood. We added 3 therapists over the course of 2 days and did a lot of work with the Ridgewood schools. It was really, really a very special job. We do it all the time, I'm sad to say. I have to be honest with you and tell you that I'm a little anxious because last week we had a death by suicide of a apprentice Catholic junior who died in therapy by suicide. So now, as someone that sort of studies these kind of things, now we have 2 death by suicides of 2, relatively speaking, high school students in less than a 21-day period. My antenna's up and I'm worried. And so I need you to know that I'm worried. I am going to start to pull some things together next week. I'm going to pull a meeting together of the various superintendents, but I think that we as a community really need to come together and really think this through. Because the data on copycat, the data on going forward really is very clear. And so we very much need to come together and be part of that conversation and part of that community. So, having said that, I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to grab my water. We have structured today's talk really in kind of thirds. And I promise you not to be boring with the PowerPoint and to read them each line by line. The way that we're going to go about this today, we're going to look at some of the challenges being a parent, as is coming up, and how challenging that can be. We're going to look at some very concrete things that you can look for in your children, in your grandchildren, in your nieces and your nephews. I need you to think wide and far. I need you to think about your next door neighbor. I need you to think about the kid across the street. I need you to think about the kid in the library, maybe where you volunteer. That just doesn't seem quite right. And so please, when I define and sort of lead us in to what we're doing, we're going to think very well. Throw that wide, very, very wide. We're going to be looking as well at what to look for. We're going to break that down into 3 spheres: emotional, physical, and school. Because that's really kids are kind of broken down to that. And then we're going to very much look at something we can do about it. The sort of now what? Okay, we have this worry. We have this conclusion. We're also going to spend a little bit of time, and I plan, by the way, to talk for about 30 to 35 minutes. I don't plan to go the whole hour. I'm hoping that we'll have dialogue during that time part. We're going to also talk about, perhaps you come to the conclusion that your child or your niece or your grandson needs some therapy. We're going to talk about, how do I find a therapist? God, how do I even start that conversation? I don't know where to go. Very, very concrete. So our hope today is to put some things in front of you for you to reflect on. Our hope today is for you to leave here today with something very concrete in your hand that you can actually think through. So when we think about about parenting today, I probably don't even need to put this slide up here, right? So I need to convince you that parenting is challenging. It's really challenging in 2023. Very, very challenging. Technology, by the way, we're going to talk about that in a minute. All kinds of other demands, pressures, things that are just on us, on our kids, and we then feel that pressure as parents. And so one of the things I'd like folks to do is to sort of, particularly if you're a parent and you're a grandparent, to really think about your style of parenting. Do you even think about your style of parenting? Is that something that you reflect on? Is that something that you and your significant other and whatever that family constellation looks like, do you talk to each other about what your strengths look like, what your parenting style looks like? And then, reflection moment. Is it the same as your parents? Are you raising your kids differently than your parents? Is it I'm doing it exactly like my parents did, or is it over here with, oh God, I'm doing the opposite of what my parents did, and hoping that that works out well? Most of us, in all honesty, probably somewhere in there, right? There's probably that sort of that middle lane. You know, I had a client, a teenager that I see, and I'm constantly reinforcing the fact that life is not black and white, right? That life is gray. That there's very few things that are good or bad, very few things that are black or white. And during COVID, occasionally we would do an online session, and I was so proud of her because I logged on to the online session. She's in her bedroom, she takes the camera, and she looks at, she had her wall painted red. She wanted to symbolically say, I get it. You know? So I want you all to realize that the world is largely gray. There really are very, very few things that are black and white. So as we think about our parenting style, there is a model out there. This model, by the way, comes out of University in Florida. It's a gentleman who I think does amazing work with parenting with kids. His subspecialty, I'll be honest with you, is suicidology. His subspecialty is preventing suicide. Again, right, that earlier reflection. We sit today in a community that is in the wake of a suicide. So we need to be thinking about these kind of things. So here's a model that you could possibly think about as a parent. So one, control. It's the calm model. So what do you actually have control over as a parent? I would argue it's small. Mary, any thoughts? None, okay. I'm hoping it's not none, but I agree that it's small. What do you actually have control over? What can you have control over? And what, when you're working with your kids, when you're sitting at your kitchen table, when you are in this room today, what do you actually have control over? Very little. It's really about the relationship that we can build with our kids, that dynamic, the openness, the ability to have conversation, the ability to have maybe difficult conversations, and so to be able to do that and do that well. We're wanting you to be, A, alert. So moms and dads are really good at this. So what's your gut telling you? What are you feeling? And so here we're leaning in as parents, and we're really getting you to be confident in your own stomach, your own gut reaction, your own. And sometimes you work with a parent and they'll say, I cannot tell you what's wrong, but I'm telling you I know there's something that's not quite right. Right? That's that gut feeling that you have as a parent. I'm here to tell you that as clinicians, we lean in and we borrow from your gut reaction. Because sometimes, many times, kids can't articulate in a way that we wished or hoped or would want them to. And we need to sort of infer, right, from kind of their behavior, infer from what's been going on in their world, infer from kind of who they're spending time with. And so know that your alertness, your gut feeling, brilliant. Stick with it, don't second guess it. In fact, check in with each other, support each other around that. We really want you to be very, very strong around that. Listening, so as a parent, no surprise here, but sometimes I find, particularly with teenagers, we'll have teenagers that'll come forward, they'll have an issue or a concern, and we want to sweep in with advice. We're kind of guilty about this as therapists, by the way, sometimes, and we really work on listening. We really work on listening. So I had a clinical supervisor when I first began at Columbia University, where I did my graduate work, and he said, Mother Nature designed you with 2 ears and 1 mouth. Let's stick to that ratio. You stick to that ratio, life is really going to go well. It's going to go well in your relationships, all relationships, by the way, not just with your kids. It's going to go well with your clients. So I'm saying to you, when your kids are around, listen, really listen, and take in what they're saying, and process, think. Take a breath before you kind of jump in. I think it's modeling. M of our COM model. Here we're looking and we're believing, we're knowing that kids watch everything we do. They may not say it, they may not comment on it, but they watch everything you do. They come together, they watch you at the kitchen table, they watch you have difficult conversations with each other, they watch you have conversations with your friends. They really do watch. And so know that how you behave, how you live in the world, how you put yourself forward is probably more important than what you say to your kids. It is actually more important than what you say to your kids. We do this other presentation on working strictly with teens, and we sort of give the bad news to families like, I'm really sorry to tell you here, what you say, almost irrelevant. As a parent, really is, almost irrelevant. It's how you live. How you live, how you act, how you kind of put yourself forward. And so, remembering that, how you model. This, by the way, also goes for our relationships with each other. So as you take a breath and think about your relationship with your partner or your spouse, as you think about your relationship with your, perhaps, parents or siblings or your friends, really deeply reflect on the fact that your kids are watching that. And although I can argue this both ways and I'm going to get myself into trouble a few times over the course of this talk, but I'm at times worried when people stay together for the kids. That concerns me as a therapist, because I've seen too often, I would say to a part of a couple or a couple, and I work a lot with couples, you're welcome to stay together for the kids, we should work together to make that happen. Know that whatever marriage you have today is likely the marriage that your child will have later in their life. So if you're cool with that, if you're good with how you feel in your relationship now, let's go forward. That's fine. But know that modeling happens in kids' imprint, kids' internalize minds. The resiliency. So here's what we're aiming for. And I'll tell you where this research comes out of. By the way, our talk today is largely based on lots of different areas of research. We're not just waiting this at West Bergen, I'm proud to say. This is really the resiliency factor, and then these are the factors that actually prevent suicide. These are the data. We can look at two things. We can look on the intensity of suicide at what can we do to sort of stop it, what can we do to disrupt, and we need to do the disrupting of the cycle. But we can also look at the research that shows us what goes well, and when there are kids that are not suicidal, that do not follow through, that do not take those gestures forward. And what are they? Here they are. Research-based, family, however defined, cohesive, and stable. Not a surprise, right? But I find it interesting when we sort of see research that matches our intuition, right? We intuitively know that a stable family, that makes sense. No huge shocking surprise there. Good relationship with peers. So we're always wanting to see who our kids are hanging out with. And so I often learn more about a client, we often learn more about clients based on who they're hanging out with, based more than on them themselves. And you'll get parents, and you know this, grandparents and parents and aunts and uncles, you'll have this moment where you go, my kid is great, but I don't love the friend group. Right, I'm just concerned. I don't love the group that they're kind of hanging out with. Big time antenna, absolutely, because we tend to reflect how we're feeling with each other. Alice Miller called it the theory of equivalent dysfunction. We are attracted to people that are exactly, it's like a lock and a key. And so it tells us something about what that is. Strong educational system and systems. We're doing well here in New Jersey, at least particularly in the Ridgewood and Bergen County. Coding and problem-solving skills. These are skills. These are teachable skills. That's why we're here today, because we're going to learn some skills. But know that in terms of your kids, this is an absolute learning moment. We can teach our kids to cope. We can teach our kids to deal with difficult circumstances. Know when to seek adult help. And so sometimes our kids need help with that. Sometimes we need to sort of gently go in and ask, how are you doing? Do you think it might be helpful to talk to someone? Do you have someone that you can talk to, even if it's not me, if I'm dad? Not at all. Maybe someone else, that they can talk to. Andy, thumbs up over here. The research shows us religious of any kind of involvement is correlated with low suicidality. So religious involvement of any kind, denomination irrelevant, religiousness, religious and that kind of background shows us that. Technology, right? The big, scary moment is technology, and yet we're all so buried in it each and every and this is not a moment where we can sort of say that our kids are too into technology. I struggled when I came into services. Am I going to turn my phone off? Am I going to not turn my phone off? Am I going to leave it in the car? Am I going to? Those were thoughts that I had. I'm embarrassed to admit I absolutely had that thought as I sort of came in. We all are heavily involved in technology. Our kids are very involved in technology, and as parents, it makes us anxious because we didn't grow up that way, right? This is the sort of the intersection where there's a lot of things that change from generation to generation, and I think every generation before us thinks that the kids are different today, right? I think that's kind of a normal phrase that we all heard. Kids are really different today, and they really do have it because they have a different experience. Technology is very different, and the research is not great. So those that spend time on their devices have a 13 to 66% higher rate of depression. That's a lot. It's a big number. It gets my attention and it worries me. And so that certainly. I would call your attention when you have some time to the Attorney General's report that came out this year. The Attorney General who put out an entire report on technology and children. It's really well done. It's really well researched. It's really well put together. I love it. I would really encourage you to at least peruse it. At least peruse the executive summary at the beginning. It's really well done. It articulates some of the concerns that are sitting in this room today. And it actually makes some suggestions on what we can do.
New Jersey Attorney General or federal?
Federal. Mary just triggered something for me, thank you, in terms of New Jersey. I want to back up just for 1 second. There is some good news in the world. Ranking of completed suicides, New Jersey sits where? State, 1 to 50. Are we high on suicide? Are we low on suicide? Low. Yes, we are either number 49 or number 50. So we're really excited. I can't tell you how happy I was to see that. And that's updated recent data. 3 primary factors: high education, right? Significantly good education system. I mean, we sort of borrow from one town to the other, and we move from here to there because we like this one and that. In the grand scheme of things, they're all really good. New Jersey. Secondly, we have lower rates of divorce, largely because of education. Right? That's correlated. Third, I told you I might get myself in trouble a little bit. I'm going to really try not to. We have very, very, very strong gun laws. So we have very strong gun laws in New Jersey. There's a direct correlation in completed suicide data to accessibility to guns. So as we are at the bottom, number 49, number 50, let me throw a few states out at you that are toward the top. Wyoming, Texas, Alaska. Why? Because in their homes, having a gun is really, it's a cultural norm. Right? That's just sort of part of the system. We were talking about this at work. We were saying, so Barbara came into work on Monday and said, I said, what'd you do this weekend, Barbara? And she said, well, I went out and bought a gun on Saturday. It would be a moment of pause, right? In our culture, it would really be a moment of pause in our office. Especially since her office is right next to mine, concerning. Just saying. But know that lack of it being part of the culture really saved us. It really, in many ways. There's a great, again, I'm going to be full of nerdy resources. I recommend a resource out of Harvard University and School of Public Health called Means Matter. It's a great site. It's about the means around people die by suicide, and it has to do with really trying to open an appropriate and calm and open dialogue about guns. And so it's really very, out of the public health, very interesting. We're not talking about the strengths over here. We're not talking about the psychologists or the social workers. It's the public health. So neat model. Last point on technology. I would really want us to have a more open dialogue with our kids around technology. And my recommendation and thinking here is not when the kids are in trouble, not when they've been caught with something, not when you found something that's concerning to you, not when you're angry and you're sort of riled about how much time they're spending. I would really recommend that at the kitchen table, we start to have a conversation about what they think about technology. I'm less concerned about what we think and really concerned about what they think. And kids often, particularly teenagers, have a lot to say. Mm-hmm. And so you go and sit with them and say, what do you think about social media? What do you think about technology? What do you think about, just dangle the question out there. And then, parents, here is our goal. Just listen. Listen, listen, listen. Just take it in. They have lots to say. We can learn a lot from them around that. If they have a hard time talking about themselves, a little therapist trick here, sometimes it's kids very easy for them to talk about their friends. So don't ask them what they think about technology if they're having a hard time talking about it. If they're struggling, ask them to, what do your friends think about fill in the blank? They'll have a lot to say and you will open a dialogue. The goal here is not even necessarily what the content is. The goal is process. The goal is an ability to sit together and have conversation, and sit together and be comfortable in dialoguing back and forth, even when it makes us uncomfortable. Because they're teenagers, they're going to get a little squirmy too around some of our conversations. So we need a role model. Yeah, you get it. This is an uncomfortable conversation. It can make us feel a little uncomfortable. All right, we're moving into our spheres here. This is where it's going to get concrete about what we're going to be looking for if we have some concerns. So first sphere of 3, emotional sphere. So we're looking for kids that do not seem to enjoy things that they used to. So my kid loved soccer, loved it, went every day, obsessed about it, read about it, watched YouTube about it, did all kinds of things, and then slowly kind of pulled back, right? And teenagers and kids do pull back. They do change lanes. Again, now I'm gonna ask you to lean in and trust that parent gut. So are they really making a change because they want to try an academic club or lacrosse instead of soccer, or is there something else going on? And so what is your, in some ways, what we're asking as parents and as therapists is to put together your thoughts. It's really your head and your heart. So is your gut heart telling you something, or is your head telling you something? So are they struggling? Are they pulling back? They just seem unhappy. They're crying often. Seem to worry a lot. Here, I get that when you think about all your children and your grandchildren and your nieces and nephews, I guarantee I can put a list in front of you and you can make me a list of which one of your kids or grandkids is the worriers and which are not. Right? That's just part of kind of who some of us are. But there's a difference between worrying for those things that sort of make sense or kind of within normal range, and those that are really beyond that are really beyond what we should be thinking about. In the little guys, we've seen the regressive kind of behavior. We're going to be looking for that. So we gave up sucking thumb, and now all of a sudden we're doing that. Now, some of that's not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes that can be soothing, and that can be warming, and that can be reinforcing. But if we're starting to see like these kind of examples of regression, of things that they used to do that they don't do, they do now, antenna up. Again, it's kind of a mathematical equation. We're going to be looking at a number of things together, not just one. And if they're avoiding social situations, of course. This is a big one, particularly for our teenagers who love social situations. They thrive on social situations, not necessarily with us. They thrive on social situations, but they thrive on social connection with each other. So if you have a kid that's been very social, going out, hanging out with friends, going to Starbucks in Ridgewood at 4 o'clock every afternoon, whatever that looks like for your kid that we're thinking about, and all of a sudden they kind of stop, it's actually very similar to the beginning. That's something that they used to do that they got pleasure out of and that they're no longer doing. Antenna's up, right? So we're just starting to think about what's going on there. Sphere 2 is more physical, it's more granular, we can measure it. So is it sleeping well? Our kids need sleep. Sleep, by the way, our kids and our adults, everyone in this room, we all need sleep. Sleep directly correlated with depression. So sleep disruption, sleep issues, not enough sleep, very directly correlated with depressive disorders and that whole world. So know that sleep's one of the things that I really center in on when we're doing an assessment. We're really looking at the kind of sleep pattern. Difficulty getting out of bed. And here again, you're going to look at me and say, my kid's 15. Come on. I get that. But there is a difference, right? There's sort of a difference between I can't really get them out of bed. They're hard to get out of bed versus I can't get them out of bed. They won't go to school. We're looking for extremes here, either eating too much or not eating enough. Again, we're thinking about the bell curve, or we're thinking about those two ends. Weight changes, a lot of physical complaints, particularly we're going to see a lot of what we would call somatization. So a lot of stomach aches, headaches, my ear hurts, I don't feel good. Some of that, we see this, by the way, it's sort of two ends. We see this in people under 11, 12, they'll somaticize, they'll really talk about things because they can sometimes articulate more clearly that. We'll see this in some of our folks over a certain age as well, some of our seniors, where they're going to the doctor 8 times for the same thing. There's nothing going on there, and so we need to think about this may be, another thing. So, emotional, all right, we've covered that. Physical, let's think about the school area. How are they doing? Right, every parent I know knows how their kids are doing because they can log on to the system and look. I have a friend who's a superintendent of schools who thinks that the ability of a parent to log on and look at test scores and grades and homework assignments is the worst thing that ever happened to the relationship between the kid and the parent. It's interesting the way he worded that. Not necessarily that it's a bad thing for you to have that information. His focus was on the relationship, which I love, between the parent and the child. So, but it's an outcome measure. We need to know how they're doing. We need to know if they were A minus, B minus students kind of in that range, and all of a sudden we're dropping. Okay, antenna's up. Could be a mental health issue. Doesn't want to go to school at all. School refusal and school anxiety is a much bigger problem than probably most people realize. School anxiety, which is technically an anxiety disorder, really argues that kids have a hard time getting through the door, that they have a hard time sometimes going through school. We have a large number of kids in all these areas of Bergen County, and they struggle with school anxiety and school refusal. It's one of the reasons I'm so proud of the West Bergen therapists who work in schools. Because we're an outside vendor, we're not employed by the school district. We're a private, nonprofit entity based here in Ridgewood. We don't have all the rules quite that some of the school does, so I can tell you that a West Bergen therapist on more than one occasion has gone to a house at 4 to 7 and stood in the kitchen and had a discussion with a kid who was refusing to go to school. If you were a school employee, that would be a challenge. That would just for lots of reasons. So we're happy that we can think outside the norm and do what needs to be done. But know that school refusal, big issue. During the interviews, I'll tell you during the interviews, and maybe there's some folks that are involved with the Board of Ed here, during the interviews that we had with administration in Ridgewood, the second question they asked was, what was our experience and our philosophy around school refusal and school anxiety? Big issue. Big issue. Similar, withdrawing from friends, doesn't want to attend social events. Last one, really important here. I would really want everyone to have a child or a grandchild or a niece or nephew who has a go-to person at school. They need a go-to person to go in life. We would love that to be us as parents. Sometimes that isn't for lots of reasons. That's not the right person to go to. So we want to sit with our kid and we just want to know, do you have a go-to person to go to at school if something isn't going well? If you need to talk about something sensitive, something embarrassing, something upsetting, who would you go to? And then, right, we're going to be quiet, we're going to sort of take that in. And if they don't have a response, then just helping them work that through, brainstorming a little bit. Maybe it's a guidance counselor, maybe it's in all honesty, maybe it's a custodian, maybe it's one of the secretaries or the executive assistants. It's why when we do school trainings, we do school trainings on everything. Because there's a lot of eyes on our kids, lots and lots and lots of eyes. It's on us to train each one of those eyes so that we make sure that all know. So we're really wanting to make sure that that's around. So let's say then that we've looked at our 3 spheres and now our antenna's up and we're concerned. And so how do we know that sort of time, when do you get to this, remember I mentioned the gray before, we're in this gray zone now, right? I think my kid might need some extra help. I think, and I mean psychological help, by the way. I'm not sure, it could be a normal ebb and flow of what that means. So again, your parent gut, critical, important. If you find yourself planning around your child's mental health issues, then our antenna's up. And so here is the example. So you're invited to someone's house, you're invited to a pool party, it's Sunday, you're all invited, and your child does not want to go because they're not feeling themselves. If you have language in your house that's code for really a mental health issue, but we say things like, he's just not having a good day. And we would all know what not having a good day means. Antennas up. In my mind, if you're making plans around and literally working your schedules, your lives, your worlds around issues, then it may be time to come in and find a good therapist. If you find yourself worrying about this child, whoever this is, And that's why I did the parentheses here. More than usual, I know you're all worried about your kids. That's why we're here. It's what makes us good human beings. It's what makes us good parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. It makes us good community members. But there's a line there. If you find yourself at work, a little hard to get work done. You find yourself on a trip and it's a little hard to focus on your tour because you're really worried, deeply worried about your child, then I would suggest to you that it's time that we do something about that we think about coming in and finding someone to talk to. Let's say then that we've concluded that we're going to try to find a therapist. This is really, and I have to tell you, as a member of the West Bergen leadership team, it frustrates me and upsets me from a macro point of view that the mental health community is so hard to access. It's so hard to, the system is just complicated, it's strange, it's unfamiliar, and it really, really, really upsets me. So let's talk about this for a second. You're going to be asking yourself a few questions. Do you know anyone that's been in therapy? Here's the wonderful and beautiful thing about COVID in many ways. COVID has made it okay to reach out for help. COVID has really made it okay to have these kind of conversations. Even prior to COVID, as we've been working on stigma, right, you see our green stigma signs around, as we've been working through stigma and really thinking through what can we do to bring down stigma, because that's what prevents people from coming in. There's lots and lots of your friends, your relatives, your neighbors who have been either in therapy themselves, their kid has been in therapy, their nephew has been in therapy, and they've probably talked about it. I love that it's talked about, because that's really different. Tom may correct me on this, but my understanding, West Bergen Mental Healthcare, we're in this lovely building over on Chestnut Street. It's comfortably ensconced next to the railroad tracks, right? Over there on Chestnut. It's down this little driveway, and as I understand it, one of the big selling features of the original building for West Bergen was that no one would see you, right? Because you were hidden. You were back down this driveway, back down, no one. And in fact, we have 2 stairwells. We call them second means of egress for fire. Nah, they're really designed so that you go outside the stairwell when you come to therapy and not walk through the originally. Stigma, right? What's that about? I'm really proud that today West Bergen owns a second building on Chestnut Street. The building on stilts kind of by the Y, that's right on the street. I love that it's right on the street. We've just redone that building. Soon you're going to see signage. I'm so proud both of West Bergen. I'm really proud of the world, actually, that we can have a building on a street and not think, oh, we probably shouldn't do that. We probably shouldn't have a mental health center on Chestnut Street. I'm really excited by that. Ask your friends who they've seen. Ask your friends what therapists they've gone to. Ask your friends where they've gone. Ask your friends where they do exactly what you would do if your child perhaps had a high blood sugar number or needed to see a neurologist because of seizures or anything like that. You would do due diligence. This is what I'm asking you to do. Lean in, ask away. Ask. Reach out to your pediatrician, to your clergy members. They always have a list, and they always have cell numbers. Do not, sorry, Andy, do not hesitate to call Andy. He and his colleagues have a list, all do, and we maintain close relationships with folks. Consider a local community post. There's all these kind of Ridgewood, Mawa, Ramsey, Allendale, all kinds of local sites. You can do anonymous postings on those sites, so you can actually log onto those sites and ask, I'm looking for a good therapist for my 12-year-old. Does anyone have a suggestion? And it doesn't have to be tied back to your name. You really can do this in a way that you can throw the net wide, get good information, and really think about that in that way. A brief word here about the difference between, this is very much a common confusion. It comes a lot in Q&A. So the difference between a psychotherapist and a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is an MD, a medical doctor, just like your general practitioner. And they are really designed to meet with the client, when appropriate, by the way, meet with the client and think about what's really getting in the way of their life from a symptoms point of view, and think about what medications might match that symptom and help. Here we're traditionally talking about antidepressants for depression, anti-anxiety meds for anxiety. We're talking about medications that might help. In today's kind of structure of the way the mental health system is worked, psychiatrists are really strong on the medications, not as strong on therapy. Right? They're not as well trained, and I'm going to say it straight out. God, I hope there's no psychiatrist in the room. I'm going to say straight out, they are not therapists. They are diagnosticians. and they are symptom managers. And thank God they're there, and we have them on the West Bergen team. They're critical and they're important to the team. The real work is with the therapy. So think of the therapist as the why. Why is it happening? What's gone on? What strategies can we put in place to help you think this through? How can we push you out of your comfort zone and get you to go to school? With the why, the relationship, the work. The studies actually show us that with moderate to severe depression, the two in conjunction, so medication in conjunction with therapy, have better outcomes than either or. I will tell you, at West Bergen Mental Healthcare, almost 300 employees, mostly therapists, handful of docs, handful of prescribers, and it will stay that way. We are primarily a therapeutic intervention. We believe in medication when it's appropriate, believe in it strongly, by the way. I don't mean to minimize it or second guess it, but we believe in the primary is the relationship. An LCSW and an LPC. So when you're going on, you're doing your research, a licensed clinical social worker, I am one, so there's one. We are MSWs, and so we train clinically. LPCs are licensed professional counselors. What I really want you to look for here is, that was perfect timing. What I want you to be leaning in and looking for here is the word license. We always want someone that's licensed. The fact that you have someone that's licensed means that they have had a certain amount of education, they've had a very similar education, they've had to pass a number of tests, they have to do ongoing continuing education units, and so we always want someone that's licensed in the field. Very, very important. Lots of folks out there that are perhaps practicing that are not as licensed. So last thing in terms of therapy. So we're going to make an appointment. We're going to call, whether it's a private practitioner, and there are many. It's a West Bergen, it's another agency, whatever works in your world. You're going to make that appointment. You're going to go with your child, and you're going to sit through that first appointment. Most therapists are going to break the appointment up, so we're going to meet together for part of the appointment, and then we're going to meet with the child alone for part of that appointment. Know that during that first, second, third, really no more than 3, we're going to be asking you to reflect on how the kid feels and how you feel about the therapist. Because therapy is like a relationship like any other. Sometimes they work well, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you just run into somewhere where you just don't gel. And that's really okay. I say to clients when they come in, we're going to spend this first session, second, third session, working together, getting to know each other, deciding whether we want to work together. And if we are not the right relationship, I will find you the right person. I'm not just going to, drop you. We're going to work really hard to get you to move on to someone else. So that could be hard. It could be particularly hard with kids because they're often like, oh, I don't want to do this again. But it's important. It's important. Last thing, how do you? Okay, cool. This is our last reflection before we open up for some discussion. We started with parenting is challenging. We're going to end this talk with parenting is challenging. And so I'm going to say to you, please don't do this alone. Do not do this alone. There is support, whether it be in this room, in this community, in your community, in your family. Do not do it alone. It's too hard a job, and I'm going to argue too, it's too important of a job for you to do it alone. Really important to be brainstorming, talking, thinking, feeling with others. Get that feedback, get those ideas. Spend some time with other parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles. Here's what I did, it worked really well. God, don't try this, I really messed up badly. And here's my list. And you want to have those open, right? Open conversations and open dialogue. Lastly, again, this goes with the modeling and our CALM model. Really wanting to make sure that you are on top of your own mental health, your own awareness, your own self-care. And if you need some help in a professional way, sometimes when the house is kind of disrupted and there's a kid that's kind of spinning, sometimes the solution, believe it or not, clinically, is to have the parent or two go to therapy. Because it sometimes will kind of bring the anxiety of the house down. Sometimes it changes the dynamics. So it's not always the kid. I don't mean it all to place this in the lap of parents. I just mean that I'm asking you to, if you need help, please reach out and find someone. And I'm going to challenge you, if you do that, to do one last thing. If you find a really good therapist for yourself, or you have perhaps seen a therapist maybe years ago, maybe it was at some point in your life, at some point, preferably if it's a teenager in the car when you're driving and not looking at each other, at some point, I'm going to ask you to openly talk about that relationship with your kid. Your child, your grandson, your niece, your nephew, the neighbor needs to know that, I went to therapy when I was in high school. I believe I struggled with whatever that is, whatever you're comfortable sharing, whatever phase that is. Our kids listen and our kids take it in. And so when we can share that I've had a good experience as a parent, very often that barrier kind of bubbles down and kind of it bubbles away. So, all right. And that is the formality. This is our information. And Andy, we're going to forward this PowerPoint that you have already, so please share with whoever wishes. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, thoughts?
And also, I would urge to, Michael will display this. There's our contact information. So if someone has a question or doesn't feel comfortable bringing up in this kind of a form, please reach out to Michael, reach out to me. Michael's our CEO, so sometimes it's easier to get me, and I would be happy to very privately make sure that we get your question answered and that we get to the resources that we need.
We almost never, we do a lot of these talks in the community, lots. We almost never, ever don't go to work on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday and have someone reach out. Because it may not be a question you're comfortable with, it may be also a question that occurs to you as you hit the stop sign as you're driving away. And that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, the accessibility in mental health care, and this is from my own experiences, I find that insurance is a big issue there. Like, I find a therapist that I really like, they don't take insurance.
Yep.
Or you find a place that does take insurance and there's a waiting list.
Yep.
And do you have any advice and resources for how to navigate that situation?
Yes.
Finding someone for yourself, for your kids?
Yes. So you're right. If it's an insurance situation, the thing you're going to want to do is log on to your insurance company's website. You're going to want to do a zip code search. You're going to put in your town. You're going to drop down by 10 miles. There's usually a drop down menu. You're going to look for licensed clinical social worker or licensed professional counselor, and you're going to be going through those lists. And so those are the in-network providers. Those will not only be the providers that are absolutely licensed, but they're also, in all honesty, they would be the most cost-effective because it's just a copay at that point. It is very hard. The challenge in the mental health system is that prior to COVID, the mental health system was just keeping up, not really, just keeping up with the demand. Now with COVID, the demand far outweighs the slot, so it far outweighs the ability of organizations and or therapists. So I would encourage you to continue to fight the fight, meaning keep leaving messages, keep talking to people. Call us. We have a network of folks that will take people as well. If not at West Bergen, we have a network of folks out in the community that we refer to as well. But it's a real issue, and I get it, and there's no magic solution here. It's a macro issue. The issue is that the demand is far outweighs the system. It's not designed well in that way. Back, I see all the way in the back.
Yeah, Michael, I was wondering if you could talk a little more about your approach to technology. Often, it says we've seen that the correlation of technology causes increased mental health issues, depression, anxiety. Correlation doesn't always equal causation, and so a lot of the studies done are studied in like a fixed time variable and not studied dynamically. There's not a systematic study, and actually other studies done showing like healthy online communities actually are beneficial for people. One, because they don't have access to certain resources and things. These actually provide them that opportunity to gain those things, and then there's the big education piece of what's missing. That a lot of parents don't have the education on the technology because it's so quickly developing and becoming new, and so it's almost a reverse where when your kid is little, you teach them how to do it on, how to cook, you teach them skills, you take them places, you teach them to drive, but it's almost the opposite is that the parents don't have that understanding. So you wouldn't drop your old kid off in the middle of the city.
Right.
But when I got on the internet and I was telling my parents everything about it, and there's this whole it's called the World Wide Web, there's a whole world out there, and so I think that it's less about blaming or being too quick to blame. I think sometimes because we don't understand it, rather than once we do understand it, we realize, this actually opens up a whole world of community and connection. And so I was wondering kind of what your approach is.
Completely agree. It's why one of the recommendations is that we open the dialogue with our kids about technology. a non-judgmental dialogue. So we're not going into this dialogue saying we hate technology. And in fact, we used to have this kind of more adversarial relationship with technology. So interesting. Then I found COVID happened. Many of us worked from home. And all of a sudden, we weren't so angry with technology when we were using technology all day to work. It's been really very interesting. However, we also are challenged by our own relationship with technology. So my take is, it's not unto itself, it's not effective. It is about utilization, it's about how to. You're exactly right. You wouldn't throw the kids the key to your car and not have a lesson, right? Or have some conversation. It just wouldn't happen. But we tend to do that with technology. There's a lot of tremendously wonderful resources, particularly if you have yourself or a child or someone that's struggling with something particular, specific. There's a lot of community out there. There's a lot of messages, a lot of places where there's a lot of support around that. I think how we handle that at the kitchen table, how we handle that at home is really the question. It's really about the relationship to the technology and the relationship to each other. In some ways, it's a triangle. And so how can we do that in an effective and positive way and that can be really hard because they've upset us if they've been on video games for 8 hours. I'm upset as a parent, right? I'm riled. And so it's hard to go into that. It's very easy for me to up here and say, oh, I can have a mutual conversation when my kid has really upset me. So we're timing our conversations really carefully. We're not having this conversation at the end of the 8th hour when we pull the plug from the fuse box on the kid. We're having this conversation in a more neutral time. Not just place, but time. So relationship and communication, 100%. I agree with you 100%. It's not unto itself negative. It's just how it's utilized. Go ahead.
How does, I see that on the TV the virtual analysts and such. How do they line up to?
Yeah,
considering that there's a limited amount of resources.
Really limited. So there's a lot of online therapists. And in fact, at West Bergen Mental Healthcare today, we're roughly 50-50, so about 50% of our sessions are online, 50%. And that, at West Bergen at least, is 100% client-driven. So whatever the client wants, we would do. The services that are online, that are kind of nationally based, I would really be looking at the background of the therapist, because I've done a little research, and it's concerning to me that some who they consider therapists may not be. And so it's really about background. That's why we talk about licensing. It's why my preference is that your sister-in-law used it for their cousin, and it went well. It's that personal feedback. So yes, lots of that, and I can see where people would go to that as a solution to the supply and demand issue, right? Let's be honest, there's a supply and demand issue in the field. And I get that can play a role. I don't think it's there quite yet, in my opinion. I hope it will get there. Yes, go ahead.
I got some really important guidance from reading about studies on resiliency in children.
Yeah.
And they found that one of the things that made children resilient was family stories about people that the children knew in the family or in the friends, in the community, who had survived challenges in life.
Okay.
And I have been using that guidance with the young people in my extended family. And it's really powerful because kids only know what they know.
That's true.
And
Well said.
right. And when they're depressed or anxious, they think they're the only ones that are having those problems. And to be in a position where you can say, oh no, Aunt Jean, Aunt whatever, remember, or you were too young to know. You just see them being empowered.
Very much.
Perspective.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct.
exactly.
It really does.
Providing
It's perspective, and it's your ability to be vulnerable as well. So it's your ability to sort of lean in and say, yeah, my mom struggled.
Yeah.
My mom struggled with depression.
Yeah.
And here's what that was like for me. And here's what I saw. And by the way, here's what worked well. Right? And so.
And without that, like we have big family gatherings.
Yep.
And there may be 15 minutes with aunts and uncles have no idea what they've been through.
Storytelling in families, I think, is
Very powerful.
really powerful.
And aunts and uncles and extended generations have a responsibility and a role in that, right? In that telling of those stories.
Right.
Very much well said. Go ahead.
This is in the college.
Yeah.
Is there a
genetic disposition?
There is. So it's really, so we get into this argument of nurture versus nature, right? So is it genetic? The study shows with some disorders there is a significant genetic predisposition. Anxiety disorders is one, for example. There's a significant, also severe and persistent mental illness is a genetic component. However, depression also has a big component of depression and anxiety. There is genetic. It's difficult to tell whether it was your experience when you were younger and your mom was depressed and you internalize that as a coping pattern, or whether it's likely to be both. So the study shows is that it's not neatly in one box or the other. It's sort of sitting on an axis. Having said that, I think we're much more open to the fact that there are genetics involved. And it helps us. It helps us when we're dealing with kids. It helps us when we're dealing with adults. This is men, sorry guys, where guys have a hard time sort of coming to the table and saying I'm struggling. When we can sort of say to them, listen, what you have is a disorder of the brain. Your levels are just a little off right now. It's not a judgment. It's not a just you. If you had a fever at 102 for 10 days, you would go to the doctor. In fact, you would be remiss if you were in 10 days. The stat that I dislike the most is that the average time it takes a person to reach out for help from the time that they reach diagnosably mental illness of some kind is somewhere between 6 and 8 years. So, name me another, from a public health point of view, right? We talked about public health. Name me another public health issue where, I was having chest pains for 6 to 8 years. my blood sugar's been, I've been diabetic for 8 years, I've been about it.
I broke my leg.
Right, exactly. What that tells us, though, is stigma, right? That tells us that we have this internalized stigma, and there's a little bit also of, all right, well, I think if I try this, it might work. And sometimes people do feel better for a bit, and so they sort of lull themselves into,
What do you comment from a mental health perspective on issues that children might have going away to college?
Yeah.
And like, there's some lots of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may or may not be a mental health issue, but it's simply
yeah, so big topic. 2 kids do transition, right? We're leaving home for the first time. And so we're wanting to build in a lot of supports. So whenever, in my family, whenever I have this extended family and I hear we're going to this school, first thing I do is log on and look at their mental health capacity. Do they have a counseling center? What does that look like? I encourage every one of my family and friends when they take their kid on a college visit to look at the counseling center, show them where the counseling center is. Let's demystify and destigmatize, right, to the issue. Let's break down that stigma. It's about dialogue and communication. So it's about helping them adjust to change. And again, you all know that some of your kids are better changed than others, right? You probably have some kids that throw them to the wilds, they're great. And then we have other kids that need structure and help you understand what day 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're building a system around that, but we're wanting to make sure to be in touch. I have one case where a kid in Pennsylvania, and we found actually a private practitioner who was not needed at the time, but we scheduled an appointment during the first week for the child therapy visit, college student freshman. At least had a meeting with their therapist, knew where the office was, and knew that it was available to them if they ever, by the way, they haven't today needed it, but they know where that therapist is.
Yeah. I have a question about the relationship and also the terminology about neurodivergence versus mental health, or not versus, but partnered with, ADHD, anxiety disorder that kind of sometimes come together. How do we understand the difference between a neurodivergence and a mental health issue? Are they the same? Are they considered different?
They are absolutely considered different.
Yeah.
Is the professionally correct answer, and it doesn't really matter. Is the human answer? So I can tell you that ADHD today is just inching out anxiety disorder for the #1 diagnosed childhood disorder. It's still ADHD. It's been that way for a while. Even when autism and Asperger's, which certainly is significant in New Jersey particularly, was high, it's still ADHD is #1. What you see though in these disorders is overlay. So you think of these concentric circles that are overlaying. You have ADHD, significant ADHD. It looks a lot like anxiety disorder, and it acts a lot like anxiety disorder, and we treat it a lot like anxiety disorder. And so the difference is that a neurodivergent So ADHD, autism, those are what we would call pervasive, meaning that they're developmental, which means that they're going to go across the lifespan, right? So they're here just to stay. And that's cool. Sometimes that's really important for us to know because we can build a plan around that. Other disorders, anxiety disorder, depression, adjustment disorder, have a timeline. They have a timeline to them. So if they get appropriate treatment, you may come to me with a diagnosis of depression. Hopefully we're going to work well together and something's going to happen and you're going to leave without that diagnosis. So I'm really careful, as we are at West Bergen Diagnostics. We're very careful to understand the diagnostic picture. We're also careful about labeling. We're really careful about that. Really careful about that. So we're very, very sensitive to what we do. So important, critical, and not at the same time. I'm sorry, I hope that doesn't. Okay. This has been really, really, really nice. So thank you so much for having us.
This church and this congregation has been so supportive of West Bergen, and Denise here has spearheaded much of it, and I just wanted to say thank you, all of you, because you really help our mission of public healing in ways that we can never possibly know. So thank you all.
So we are going to, as we always do, hang out because there might be coffee. And if anyone has a question they want to come up to, please, we'll be here.
And as Michael said, and Susan knows as well as we have lists of people that we can point you to if you need help. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Susan, to Billy, to another member of the clergy, because we can often point you to those folks who are licensed. I'm not a licensed counselor in any way. I'll sit and listen to you and pray with you. I'm going to point you to someone like Michael who will give you the help you need. So please don't hesitate to reach out on those needs that you come up and help you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it.
So we're gonna, we recorded the forum.